He stole my promotion, my spotlight, and even the stupid office chair I had been eyeing for months. If hell had a human form, it would be Aaron Hayes with his smug grin and infuriating perfection. But the cruelest part? I couldn't stop noticing how his cologne lingered long after he left the room. I guess that's how every disaster begins, when hate and desire blur until you don't know which one is eating you alive. I met Aaron my first week at the Manhattan office. Fresh out of grad school, hopeful and naive, I thought talent and hard work were enough to carve a place here. But Aaron was the golden boy. Sharp-tongued, brilliant, and impossible to ignore, he seemed born to eclipse me. Every meeting turned into a silent war. Every project a battlefield. And every time he won. At first, I told myself it was fine. Someone had to be second best, right? But slowly, the bitterness grew claws. Watching him breeze through presentations with that magnetic confidence while my voice cracked with nerves was like swallowing glass. He was everything I wasn't. And worst of all, he knew it. Yet beneath the biting remarks and cold stares, there was something else. Moments so fleeting I almost thought I imagined them. Like when the elevator doors almost closed on me and Aaron's arm shot out, pulling me inside without a word. Or the time a senior executive sneered at my proposal, and Aaron, of all people, interrupted with a smooth, "Actually, I think Daniel makes a good point." His tone was casual, dismissive even, but it silenced the room. I hated that I remembered these moments at night, lying awake in my shoebox apartment, wondering who Aaron Hayes really was when the office lights dimmed and the mask slipped. The night everything changed, New York was drowning in rain. I stayed late to finish a report, another chance to prove myself. Another futile attempt to outshine him. My laptop flickered, exhausted like me, when the sound of footsteps echoed. Of course, it was Aaron. Always there, as if the universe had a sick sense of humor. "You'll ruin your eyes if you keep squinting at that screen," he said casually, shrugging off his jacket, his white shirt clinging faintly to his skin from the rain. I rolled my eyes. "What do you care? Don't you have a mirror to admire yourself in?" His lips twitched, almost a smile. "Touché. But seriously, Daniel, you push too hard." And then, for the first time, I saw it concern. Real, raw, unguarded. It threw me off balance, and before I could respond, the power cut. The office was plunged into darkness. Only the city lights bleeding through the windows kept us from total blackness. "Perfect," I muttered, fumbling for my phone. "Relax." His voice was low, steady. "I'll check the breaker." But he didn't move right away. Instead, he stood there, studying me in the half-light, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. The silence stretched, heavy and intimate, until my chest ached. That was when I noticed his hand hovering near mine on the desk, close enough that the warmth radiated between us. A spark, terrifying and undeniable, leapt through me. I should have pulled away. I should have reminded myself that this was Aaron, my rival, my tormentor. But I didn't. And in that suspended moment, for the first time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I had been wrong about him all along. Aaron didn't touch me that night, and maybe that's why I couldn't stop replaying it afterward. That suspended electricity between us, the way his gaze lingered, the faint brush of warmth from his hand, then nothing. He left me there in the darkened office with more questions than answers. The next morning, everything snapped back to normal, or at least his version of normal. He breezed into the office in a tailored navy suit, flashing his charming smile at the receptionist, dropping a cutting remark about my insanely heroic attempt at single-handedly reviving the electric grid last night. Laughter rippled around us. I wanted to sink into the floor, but then I caught Ida flicker in his eyes, almost apologetic, before he turned away. It would have been easier if he'd just stayed the villain. The truth is, I'd built my whole career around hating Aaron Hayes. He was my motivation and my measuring stick, the reason I worked late, the reason I poured caffeine into my veins, the reason I refused to quit even when the stress chewed at my insides. Without him, who was I? Just another faceless analyst in a city already overflowing with talent. But now, things weren't so simple. A week later, I stumbled into one of those company cocktail parties. You know the kind. Overpriced champagne, forced smiles, everyone secretly measuring each other's success. I hated these events. I hated the way my suit never fit quite right, the way my jokes landed flat, the way I blended into the wallpaper while Aaron shined like the centerpiece. And, of course, there he was already surrounded by executives, laughing easily, his glass catching the light. I told myself to avoid him. I told myself to grab a drink, nod at the right people, survive the night. But fate, or maybe some cruel office god, had other plans. Daniel, one of the directors, called me over, his arm draped casually around Aaron's shoulders. You've met our star, haven't you? Always neck and neck with Hayes here. Isn't that right? Neck and neck. I almost choked. Aaron's smile didn't waver. Neck and neck implies he's close, doesn't it? The group chuckled. My face burned. The director moved on, but I caught Aaron watching me, his grin fading, his brow furrowing as if he hadn't meant it to sting so deeply. I escaped to the balcony, gulping the crisp winter air. I wanted to hate him. God, I wanted to. But the truth was I felt small, invisible. Then the glass door slid open, and there he was again. You shouldn't let them get to you, he said quietly. I laughed bitterly. Easy for you to say. You live for their approval. Do I? His voice carried something I'd never heard before. Weariness. I turned to him, really looked at him. His tie was loosened, his smile gone, and for the first time, Aaron Hayes looked human. You think I like this circus? He asked. Every laugh, every compliment, it's all performance. If I stop smiling, if I stop winning, I disappear. You think I'm untouchable, but the truth is, I can't afford to fail. Not once. His confession hit me harder than any insult ever had. And then softer, you, Daniel. You're different. You fight because you want to prove something. I fight because I'm terrified of losing everything. The city glittered below us, and for a heartbeat, the world went silent. No office politics, no rivalry, just two men carrying invisible weights. Why are you telling me this? I asked. His eyes met mine, intense and searching. Because you're the only one who'd understand. Before I could respond, someone called his name from inside. Just like that, the mask slid back into place. He straightened his tie, flashed that perfect grin, and left me standing there, heart pounding like I just survived an earthquake. The weeks that followed blurred between rivalry and something dangerously close to intimacy. We argued in meetings, yet somehow ended up sharing late-night coffees when deadlines loomed. He teased me mercilessly, but his gaze softened when he thought I wasn't looking. I told myself it meant nothing. I told myself I was imagining it. Until the night of the client presentation. It was the biggest pitch of the quarter, and of course I was paired with Aaron. Hours before the meeting, I discovered that half of my data had mysteriously vanished from the shared drive. Panic clawed at me. I tore through files, called IT, cursed the universe. Nothing. Without that data, my section would collapse. I would collapse. That's when Aaron appeared at my desk, calm as ever. Check your email, he said. Confused, I opened my inbox. There it was, a neatly compiled backup of every file I'd lost. Labeled, color-coded, flawless. I stared at him. How did you? He cut me off with a shrug. You're welcome. I wanted to demand answers. How had he known? Why had he helped me? But there wasn't time. We went into that presentation side by side, and for once we weren't competitors. We were partners. The flow was seamless, our words weaving together like a well-rehearsed dance. When the client signed the deal, applause erupted. And in the middle of it all, Aaron looked at Menet smug, not superior, just proud. That look haunted me long after the meeting ended. But the truth always finds its way out. It happened on a Friday night long past midnight. I'd stayed behind again, determined to prove myself, when I heard voices down the hall. Curiosity pulled me closer until I froze at the doorway of the conference room. Aaron was inside, speaking with one of the senior partners. You've been covering for him again, the partner said sharply. I'd rather they underestimate me than him, Aaron replied. He deserves more than what this place will give him if they keep writing him off. My breath caught. The partner sighed. You can't keep protecting him, Aaron. One day, he'll find out. Aaron's jaw tightened. I don't care. Let him hate me if it keeps him safe. I stumbled back, heart racing. All those moments, the backup files, the subtle deflections, the hidden support, they weren't coincidences. He had been there all along, shielding me, sacrificing without letting me see. And I had hated him for it. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every word I'd overheard replayed in my mind like a cruel loop. He had been protecting me. Not just once, not just in small, random moments, but consistently, deliberately, silently. And I had spent years despising him. The weight of it pressed against my chest until it hurt to breathe. I thought about the backup files, the subtle way he redirected attention in meetings when I stumbled, the times he intercepted criticism before it hit me. All those nights I cursed him for being untouchable. All those mornings I glared at his perfect confidence. It had all been a performance. Not just for the company, for me. I wanted answers. I wanted to grab him by the collar and demand why. Why me? Why go to such lengths for someone who'd given him nothing but resentment in return? But when I saw him the next morning, laughing with a client, his mask perfectly intact, I froze. The words stuck in my throat. How do you confront someone for caring too much? Instead, I withdrew. I avoided him in the office, skipped the usual late-night coffee runs, answered his teasing remarks with cold silence. It was childish, maybe even cruel, but I didn't know how else to handle the storm inside me. And of course, Aaron noticed. One evening, as I was packing up early, a rare thing for May, heard his voice behind me. You've been avoiding me. I stiffened. Don't flatter yourself. I've just been busy. Busy ignoring me? His tone was calm, but his eyes were sharp, searching. I shoved my laptop into my bag. Not everything revolves around you, Aaron. Doesn't it? His words were quiet, but they hit me like a slap. I spun around. What's that supposed to mean? He stepped closer, closing the space between us. It means I know you, Daniel. Better than you think. You can throw every wall you want, but I see you. I always have. My pulse quickened. Then tell me why. Why go out of your way to make me feel small, to humiliate Muhail at the same time? Doing everything to protect me? His jaw tightened. For the first time, Aaron Hayes looked cornered. Because if I didn't push you, he said finally, you'd never fight back. You'd never find your voice in this place. And you deserve more than blending into the background. His voice cracked slightly at the end, the perfection slipping. Do you know how many times they tried to sideline you? How many times they questioned if you belonged here? And every time, he broke off, his fists clenching at his sides. You what? My voice was barely a whisper. His eyes locked onto mine, raw and vulnerable. I took the hits for you. I made sure you had the chance to prove yourself. Even if it meant you hating me. Silence swallowed us. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. You're lying, I said weakly, but I knew he wasn't. He stepped closer still, until I could feel his breath on my skin. I'd rather be your villain than watch you disappear, Daniel. My chest ached with something I couldn't name. Anger, guilt, longing, all tangled into a knot I couldn't untangle. And before I could stop myself, I whispered, You're an idiot. A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips. Probably. The tension between us burned so hot it felt unbearable. His hand twitched at his side, like he wanted to touch me but didn't dare. I hated how much I wanted him to, but instead, I grabbed my bag and fled. The days that followed were chaos inside and out. The firm was preparing for a merger. Tensions were high, deadlines brutal. Aaron and I were thrown together constantly, our unspoken truths simmering just beneath the surface. Every glance felt loaded, every word edged with something deeper. One night, after another 14-hour day, we collapsed in the break room. The city was asleep, but the fluorescent lights hummed above us like they never rested. You ever think about quitting? I asked suddenly, staring at the ceiling. All the time, he admitted, surprising me. I turned my head. Seriously? You're like the company's golden boy. Golden boys are just puppets with shinier strings, he said bitterly. I laughed softly, Not because it was funny, but because it was painfully true. "Why do you stay, then?" I asked. His gaze shifted to me, heavy and unguarded. "Because of you." The words hung between us like a live wire. My throat went dry. "Aaron." He leaned forward, his voice low. "Don't you get it, Daniel? It was never about beating you. It was about keeping you here. With me." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Every wall I had built, every layer of hate and pride, cracked under the weight of his confession. And then slowly, carefully his hand brushed mine on the table. The touch was tentative, almost fearful, like he was giving me the chance to pull away. But I didn't. For the first time, I didn't. Of course, life has a cruel sense of timing. The next week, news of the merger exploded through the firm. Layoffs, restructuring, power plays. Suddenly, everything we had built, everything we had confessed, was threatened by forces bigger than both of us. Whispers filled the office: who would survive, who would be cut, who would rise in the new hierarchy. And then I heard it, Aaron's name on the list of those at risk. It didn't make sense. He was untouchable, the star. Unless he had been putting himself in the line of fire for me all along. The realization nearly knocked me over. He wasn't just protecting me in small ways. He had been sacrificing his own standing, his own safety to shield me. And now he might lose everything. I couldn't let that happen. For the first time, I understood what it meant to fight not just for myself but for him. When the senior partners gathered to review performance, I walked straight into that boardroom. My hands shook, my throat burned, but I forced the words out anyway. "You're making a mistake," I said, my voice carrying across the polished table. "If you cut him, you're cutting the reason half these deals ever happened. You want the truth? He's the reason I've gotten this far. He's the reason this team works. You think he overshadows people, but he doesn't. Lifts them up. He lifted me up. And if you can't see that, then you don't deserve him." The silence that followed was suffocating. Aaron was staring at me from the corner of the room, his expression unreadable, his jaw tight, his eyes shining with something fierce and unspoken. For once, I didn't care about the consequences. For once, I wanted him to know that I saw him, that I chose him. That night, he found me on the rooftop of the office building. The city stretched endlessly below, lights flickering like stars. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "I did," I answered. "You've been fighting for me all these years. It's about time I fought for you." He stepped closer, the distance between us shrinking until there was nowhere left to hide. "I don't deserve you," he murmured. "Maybe neither of us deserves the other," I whispered back. "But I'm tired of pretending I don't want this." And then finally his lips met mine. It wasn't polished or perfect like his public mask. It was raw, desperate, trembling with everything we had both held back for years. It was hate turned into love, rivalry turned into devotion, pain turned into something worth surviving for. When we broke apart, breathless, the city kept shining below us. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of being in his shadow. Because maybe, just maybe, we were meant to stand there together. Love, as I was quickly learning, wasn't the end of a war, it was the beginning of a new kind of battle. The rooftop kiss should have sealed everything, tied a ribbon on years of rivalry and silence. But real life wasn't that generous. The merger storm raged harder than ever. Executives hungry for power, colleagues whispering, rumors spreading like wildfire. Our fragile, newfound connection was immediately tested by the unforgiving world we lived in. The next morning, when I walked into the office, eyes followed me. Not with the usual disinterest, not with indifference but sharp, calculating curiosity. Something in the way Aaron lingered near my desk, the subtle shift in how we moved together, must have tipped people off. Or maybe the universe just enjoyed dangling knives over us. Whispers snaked through the cubicles. "Hayes and Miller? That explains a lot. Think it'll affect the merger?" Fear lodged itself in my chest. The firm wasn't the kind of place where vulnerability was welcomed, let alone love, especially not love between two men in an environment built on sharp suits and sharper knives. Aaron noticed. Of course he did. He always noticed. Let them talk, he murmured one evening, catching me staring too long at the suspicious looks thrown our way. You don't care? I asked, incredulous. His lips curved, but his eyes were serious. I've cared too much about their opinions for too long. I'm done. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to, but I knew the stakes. If the wrong person decided our connection was a liability, it wouldn't just be my career on the line, it would be his. And Aaron had already sacrificed too much for me. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. We were called into a closed-door meeting with the new partners, the ones leading the merger. Their words were polite, but their tone was knives wrapped in silk. Mr. Hayes, one of them said, fingers steepled, we've reviewed your recent performance. While impressive, there are concerns about your judgment. Certain choices suggest divided loyalties. I knew what they meant. Me. Aaron's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. And Mr. Miller, another partner, continued, you've shown potential, but you've also benefited from protection. We expect our analysts to stand on their own. My hands shook under the table. Protection. The word sliced through me. This firm values independence, the partner said smoothly. We can't afford distractions. The implication was clear. Aaron finally spoke, his voice steady but edged with steel. If you're asking me to choose between the job and him, then you're underestimating how much he's worth. The air went cold. I looked at him, stunned. He had just thrown his career onto the fire without hesitation. And I realized I couldn't let him. That night, in the quiet of his apartment, we argued. You can't just risk everything for me, I snapped, pacing his living room. Aaron leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching me with that maddening calm. I already have. That's not the point. My voice cracked. You're better at this than anyone. This firm, hell, this whole city sees you as untouchable. And you'd throw it all away for me. His gaze softened. Daniel, I'd throw it away if it meant you could finally see yourself the way I do. The words broke something inside me. Years of anger, self-doubt, envy, they all crumbled under the weight of his devotion. I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. I don't deserve you. He sat beside me, close enough that our knees brushed. Maybe not. Maybe neither of us deserves the other. But we're here. And I'm done pretending I don't want this. I lifted my head, meeting his eyes. For once, I let the truth spill out. I want this too. I want you. The relief that washed over his face was almost unbearable in its beauty. He reached for me, tentative, and when our hands locked together, it felt like the world finally stopped spinning out of control. The fallout wasn't easy. We faced scrutiny, suspicion, even veiled threats from those who saw us as a liability. There were nights I thought we wouldn't survive it, nights I almost begged him to let go before the weight crushed us. But Aaron refused to bend. And slowly, impossibly, the storm began to pass. Because while some tried to use our bond against us, others saw what I had finally learned together. We weren't weaker. We were stronger. The deal that secured the merger's success? We landed it. Not Aaron, not Mayus. Our partnership, forged in rivalry and tempered in love, became undeniable. And when the dust settled, when the firm had no choice but to acknowledge what we brought to the table, we walked out of that boardroom not as enemies, not as colleagues locked in silent war, but as equals. Months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, we found ourselves back on the rooftop where it all began. The city stretched beneath us, golden in the rising sun. Do you ever miss it? I asked softly. The game, the masks, being their golden boy. Aaron shook his head, sliding his arm around my shoulders. Not for a second. I'd rather be yours than theirs any day. I laughed, leaning into him. That's ridiculously corny. Maybe. He kissed the top of my head. But it's true. And for the first time in years, I believed in happy endings. Not the perfect kind you read about, but the messy, fragile, beautiful kind you fight for every day. Because the man I once thought was my greatest rival turned out to be the one who had been protecting me all along. And now, finally, I could protect him too. Together. Always. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, Please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.